So I'm Rick Peters, the CISO for Operational Technology North America. And for about the last 2 years, I've been working with Fortinet in continuing to modernize their solution for operational technology. I like the idea of the provocative. We started out there, and the must-dos, and the guardrails. I like those kinds of ideas because it gets us thinking. So I'd like to think today, this session is all about provoking thought. So let's go there. The 38 years leading up to 2018, I spent my life in the intelligence community. You know, fancy way of saying we were breaking things. Part of the business of going after industrial control systems. So you learn a whole lot, but you fast forward to the last 5 to 10 years, and of course that entire landscape has changed dramatically. You know, in some ways I'd like to go back, be able to prosecute missions, because boy, it'd be a lot easier today. You know, the idea of converging or integrating, as Sid pointed out in the slides, I think is an important thing, an important thought. And so 2 sides of the equation of the fence that I'd like to look at real quick, and to start that thought provocation is, first start by looking inward. You know, I think it's important, if you're an OT system owner, to know yourself, to understand that with this transformation of our environment, our connection, DMZ, whatever you want to call it, you've brought about a much larger, grander opportunity for the adversary. The attack surface has expanded, some would argue exponentially. The point is, it's expanded. The point is, in many instances, the adversaries are already on target. And if you take that approach, I think it's important, right, to acknowledge, right, that tools are being reused. I've listened to sessions even 2 weeks ago, listening to practitioners talk about the fact that they're still leveraging toolboxes that are 10 to 12 years old. Led my mind to thinking, so there's a lot of work to do if we're going to, one, do more than just know thyself, but build into that thought process, what is it that I'm doing to outmaneuver the adversary? Because clearly they're still using social networking tools, they're using standard hacking tools like issuing a payload on a firmware update. These are capabilities, techniques that have been in play for a very long time, and they're still working. So the stand back point when we look at converging these environments, of course, is that we're dealing with legacy technology. You know, Mandy just alluded to that. So that's a concession. That's the consequence of this convergence. And so we just need to acknowledge that as we move forward, as we are examining ourselves. I think, again, it's all about protecting the cyber physical. If we think about what it means to ensure safe and continuous operations, which we know is kind of a primary tenet of OT, it says, you know, I'm not going to concern myself with the motivation of the adversary and their playbook, but rather understand that in fact they're going to carry it out. Whether extortion is the goal, or exfiltration, or espionage, or of intelligence, or even sabotage. My ability to detect and react to that at speed is ultimately the goal that we need to have as we're thinking about how to solve that problem. You know, survey data, and Fortinet's been famous for doing surveys, has yielded intel that said 90% of the OT system owners are out there saying, yep, my system's been breached. More than half of them said multiple times, so they're already conceding that point. I think that's important because you're going to read lots and lots more. There's a lot of fascinating material out there. I think Secure World's hosting a forum in April where their banner is, ransomware's gone nuclear. It got me to read it. So, wow, what do they mean by that? The simple derivative underneath of that headline was, we're up against a very committed adversary. Why? Because it's profitable. Again, across all of those domains or attack surfaces, the provocation is, or motivation typically is profit. It's about getting information. If data or intelligence is the commodity, the return on investment is great enough to keep them in business gainfully. And so we need to think about that. But beyond that, I would say simple messages, think inside out. And by that, it's not just that perimeter defense isn't important, but it's an insider focus. And again, data has pointed out through surveys time and again that the OT system owners are really worried about that. So flipping the script quickly, I want to think outwardly instead of inwardly. Approaching or adopting approaches to work this problem, I think about 3 threads that were important to me in the intelligence community, and I think it translates nicely into the OT security solution space. It starts with transparency. We know OT system owners are very retentive when it comes to introducing latency into their business because it's all about speed and productivity and, of course, safe on top of that. So if we think about transparency or designing in security, that's clearly important. The solution must scale. Being change averse, as OT systems typically are, owners, and we think about the provocation of change, whatever we're going to put in place must scale and last. The longevity of a solution is very, very important. And the third tenet in there is speed. Since factories, whether you're talking about manufacturing or whether you're talking about the delivery of energy or transportation systems, the wide array of verticals that comprise OT, the one thing that we have to be mindful of is our ability to not just outmaneuver, but prosecute that mission in a way that we are indeed defending that environment, making decisions on intelligence, and allowing that to happen without affecting the finished product. So building on that just quickly with a couple of 3 thoughts on best practices, Fortinet advocates in its security fabric approach visibility as a primitive or tenet of what we're trying to do with control and automated awareness, which yields actionable intelligence. The point of all of that is to think about a continuous trust assessment. Many of you are familiar with in this cybersecurity framework, so that's not new data in there. But I would just like to say, we're really talking about building on the notion of trust. And so I'd say trust but verify, because it's a continuous process. If we're talking about asset identification or getting to the point where I've got context on every single enabled asset that's touching my environment, then I'm building on that so that I have earned trust. And the last point I'd say is we're talking about a value of collaboration. This very community and gathering of individuals in here, subject matter experts, illustrates that. There's value in collaboration, driving towards solutions and services and support which reflect integration. That was one of the tenets that attracted me in the first place to cross over to the commercial side and work on this problem space. It's bigger than one entity, and it's a drive towards developing, perfecting, and heading down a journey path that says at the end of the day you're going to have more knowledge, more insight, more awareness of your respective system, and that in a sense is going to give you that sense of wellness at any moment in time. Not just today, but as time passes and things scale up, you'll continue to be able to sustain that posture.